Welcome back to Midlife Unfiltered. I'm Donna and this is Nick. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And today we are graced with the presence of Dr. Mike Ayers. He is a researcher, a former pastor, and author of Father, a Friend, which will be coming out in January. It's a research-backed framework with 7 core competencies that dads need every stage of a child's life from crib through college, because fatherhood is just too important to guess your way through. Welcome, Mike. How are you doing today?
Hey, thank you. I'm so glad to be with both of you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've had a lot of moms on here. We've had a lot of wives on here, their perspective on raising children, being single moms and whatnot. So getting your perspective on this, I cannot wait to hear. So why don't you let our audience know a little bit about who you are, even though we just listened to you, but let them know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Texas, and I have a ministry background. I was a pastor for 25 years. And while I was pastoring, working with families, as you well know, I was teaching in higher education, and I was teaching leadership and management courses. Through that school, I was able to go back, and they paid for me to get my PhD in organizational leadership. It was a bachelor's degree program that they were starting, and they needed somebody to lead it. So I went back to school, went through all that, got my degree. And as I was going along, I really began to understand, particularly right after having kids, that when it came to fatherhood, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was not raised with a healthy example of fatherhood. So that was not anything that I inherited. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't have a really good grasp of the way I should approach my children. And so I began thinking a lot about fatherhood and began meeting with men, watching healthy families, being mentored by fathers that I thought were doing it right. I began to read a lot, became a student, research articles, parenting books, anything I could get my hands on. And I began merging what I was learning about fatherhood with the principles that I came to understand with leadership. And as I told you, if a father is anything, he's a leader of his children, right? He's called to influence them, for them to reach their potential. So these theories about influence and what that looked like in leadership merged perfectly with thoughts I was having about fatherhood. So about 10 years ago, I began writing all this stuff down. And eventually that formed a model that I've presented in the book that's coming out. It's called the Father-Friend Model. My book is called Father-Friend: How Intentional Dads Lean In, Lead Well, and Love Big at Every Stage. So I found a lot of books on parenting. There were not as many on fatherhood. And most of the books that I saw were kind of like parenting tips and parenting hacks and memoirs and stories about fathering, but not a model or a framework by which men could wrap their mind around what they should do. The research is clear. Children grow in very predictable stages, and they need different things from their parents at those different stages. But I didn't really find anything that labeled what role a dad should play, primary role he should play in those stages. So I formed this model. It's a 4-stage developmental model, and it tells dads the 4 stages of fatherhood as their children are developing, what their primary role should be in those stages, what their actions and attitudes, what are the competencies needed, and giving their children not what they're comfortable giving, but giving their children what they need.
Love that. Wow.
Wonderful.
My husband was born and raised in Nigeria, and his dad had 3 wives because his dad was Muslim. And his dad, obviously spread his time between the 3 wives. But he always would say that even though he didn't live with his dad when he was like 6 or 7, he was sent to go live with his grandparents because they lived closer to the school they wanted him to go to. He always visited his dad. He always talks about how his dad influenced him not to do this. And he always said, education and school, you got to study. What are your grades? I need to see. Even though his dad didn't go to school, couldn't read or write, but in his mind, he knew that's what it was. And he always said, you're not meant to work on a farm like his other brothers do. They have, poultry farms and fish farms and whatnot. But he just knew my husband was not meant to work on a farm. He's like, you are meant to be something. I know you are. And he always, even though my father-in-law is not alive anymore, he always will say, my dad, he goes, I remember sitting on this tree near the river or near the creek, whatever it was. And he said, we would talk, and he would be like, son, you're not to do this. You need to do this. And he always just says, even though he didn't live with his dad was very present in the way that he knew how to be present. And now my husband is that way for our children. When they were first born, he didn't know what to do. He's like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, I got you. Don't you worry. And then as they got older, I switched to, I'm great. I love that you want to play with them. That's fantastic, but I need you to work with me and not against me. So when I discipline them, I need you to back me up on this. And he's like, okay. And he's like, now obviously they're teenagers and two of them are over 18 now, but he's just like, okay, I've got you. But yeah, like you said, though, his dad was present in the way that his dad knew how to be present. And he thanks him every day for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the story of most dads. At least most dads that I meet are doing their very best. They're committed.
Yeah.
They're trying to do. I mean, they have time limitations, and I know they struggle with stress and pressure and providing and managing time and building a career while at the same time trying to engage. So most dads that I meet love their kids. It's not the question as to whether they will love them. It's the question as to whether they will love them intentionally, and will they love them in a way with a long-term goal in mind, knowing a clear purpose for fatherhood and a plan for it. Because what I found is that men with good intentions, and that's what we have, we start off with really good intentions, but we drift.
Sure.
And life gets busy. And we forget, we hold that newborn, we say, I'm going to give this kid my very best, but life gets busy and things change and we forget that moment. And so, I've tried to say to dads, we've got to keep a purpose in front of us. And that's what I've tried to do, is provide a clear purpose for fatherhood and then a plan by which to implement that purpose. Because without that, we drift. And when we drift, it leads to regrets. I just read a statistic this morning that said 7 out of 10 fathers feel like they've missed important moments with their children. So you can read a lot about father regret. What I don't find a lot on is proactive, prescriptive help for dads so that they don't have those regrets. And so that's what I'm trying to provide.
I love that. I love that you said that, because I was telling my nephew that he and his wife are not together anymore. And I told him when they were struggling, I said, you really need to try to fix this. I said, and he was at fault for it, and he knows that he's at fault for it. And I said, you're going to lose her. You're going to lose your children. She's going to find somebody else that treats her the way that she deserves. I said, because you're not being a good person right now. I said, do you want your children waking up every single morning saying hello to another man? Do you want them to have a better relationship with this other person versus you because of your actions? And he just was like, no. And I'm like, well, then you need to fix this. I mean, obviously it didn't work out because they tried, they really did, but she only could take so much, and he knows that he was at fault for everything. But, he's very much proactive in their lives. He picks them up from school while she's working, and he drops them off, or they stay with her. So he's very much involved in their life, even though he's not with them. But he does tell me, he's like, I don't want what you said. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to, you have to be as much involved in their life. I'm like, you have to know their school. You have to know, you have to take them to the movies. You have to answer the phone. I'm like, you have to be very much involved in their life now, as much as you can. When they call, you need to drop everything and answer that phone. I said, because you don't know what that phone call is going to be. And he's like, okay, even though they're little itty bitties, they're 2 and 4. But at 2 and 4, this is the memories that they're going to remember. Oh, my dad was not here, or my dad was here. So I like that you said that, because he's very, he's learning. He's learning that now, that he now needs to step up and be the dad that he can be at such a young age.
Yeah, that's a dad that's really trying to live with some sense of purpose with respect to his kids. And that's very admirable. Sadly, again, a lot of dads kind of lose their way.
Yeah.
And it takes a wake-up call like that sometimes for them to be reminded of how important this role is, because fatherhood is just too important to guess your way through. It's too important to just leave to chance. Men get educated. They have purpose in their businesses. Some of them have life mission statements, life purposes. They've been clear about so many things in their life, but when it comes to being a dad, they'll just say, okay, well, I'll just figure it out as I go. And I think our kids deserve something better. And
Sure.
again, it's not about peddling guilt because again, many dads are doing their very best. What I've found,
Absolutely.
they just haven't been equipped. A lot of them just don't know because unfortunately, the world in which we live, many of us men are bringing into marriage and into fatherhood things that were handed down to us.
Yeah.
hmm
Question
Do
for
you?
you. So what the gentlemen that you work with or that reach out to you, like what what are their breaking points that they feel like, you know what, I really need guidance? Like what do you think that most of the people that come to you are like seeking?
Yeah, most of it goes along the lines of stresses and pressure with work. There's an irony here because in the years where your kids really need you as a dad to engage the most, which I believe is that window between 7 years old and 12 years old.
Hmm.
Those are the years also when most men are seeking to build their careers and advance,
Yeah,
and
of course.
earn money for their family. So it's this constant struggle. And so I teach a lot about time management and priority management and keeping first things first, and meaning that you have to, Stephen Covey said it's easier to say no when there's a deeper yes within.
Hmm.
And so what we have to do as dad, it's not about doing more. It's about choosing better. And so we've just got to choose better. We have an amount of time that God has given us on this earth and we have to manage it. And many times that means saying no to other less important things. And sometimes dads are not aware of what again, they're just kind of hydroplaning and are not really aware. So some of it is about making them aware of use of time and what kind of activities are they involved in. How much are you scrolling your phone? And I know you're busy and you're working hard, but what about your weekends? How are you spending them? What about your evenings? Can you shut the phone off in the evenings? Can you close the emails and not answer work emails and make those sacrifices? Someone once said sacrifice is not giving up the things you don't love. It's giving up the things you love for things you love more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of good things in life that compete for our attention, but are they the best things? And so I try to challenge men to say, hey, this time, as you said, Nick, this time is going fast and the window
It is.
closes.
Yeah.
And one of the regrets that men have most is that they did not understand how quickly their kids grow up,
I say that all the
Well,
time.
I
Like
feel
Yeah.
that as a
Donna's
dad. I've
kids,
got 3 young adult children and
yeah,
Yeah.
all the time.
I just miss them being kids
I
and having those
I
yeah,
think
moments
that's
with them.
I think that's
But I don't
why
have them.
our parents enjoy our kids so much because they're not working. They're, or just in a sense, they don't have those stresses that they had when we were
That's
growing up
right.
with them.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
now, here you go. They're all yours, and they love it. I say to this day, my mother loved my kids more than she loved me and my sister.
Yeah, I get it. I have 4 grandchildren, and so I totally understand that. There's something there, but it's a little bit easier now than when you're in the midst of it with them every day. But
Because
yeah,
we get to love, snuggle, and then send back.
that's exactly right.
That's what I liked. That's what I was saying. We love, we snuggle, and then we send back. So,
That's right.
but so let me ask you a question. What would you tell a man, a father, who maybe very unexpectedly has become a single father, not by choice? I don't mean it could be through divorce. It could be maybe the mother sadly passed away, she walked away, or she did some bad choices that and landed her behind bars, and now they're now raising the children on their own. What would you tell somebody of that, Nick, that is going through that?
Yeah, that happens a lot. In fact, I'm in a small group with 3 other men who are in blended families. They're
Mhm.
not single fathers, but
Okay.
they're in blended families and are dealing with managing all of that. It's a very difficult thing to navigate for a man if he is a single dad trying to
Mhm.
handle the kids on his own. I really have a conviction that both moms and dads are very important in the development of a kid. And they're kind of irreplaceable in some ways. That doesn't mean that a single mother can't raise really good kids. Of course not.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that a single dad can't raise really good kids, but what is truly best is for a whole family unit and for kids to be raised in that way. But not even all whole family units are all that healthy. So, you know, you have to qualify in that way. But when I talk to single dads, I just really try to encourage them. They need more encouragement than anything else. And I also try to say to them, both to single dads and single moms, is, hey, it's really important that your child has a woman figure in your child's life that they can look up to and respect and see as nurturing, a mother type figure that maybe can be a part of the family in some way. And that could be a grandmother, of course, but that's really important. Single moms, I say the same thing. It's important to have a man's presence in your child's life in some way. And I know that's a little bit politically incorrect to say, but I really believe that's true. And I think the research bears that out.
Yeah.
Single fathers have that challenge of going to work, just as single moms do, of going to work and then managing their kids. The only thing I can say to them is, listen, do the very best you can. Try not to miss these years and don't give up. That's the biggest thing, is just don't give up. Stay encouraged. Run the long race. Depend on other people. That's really important for a single parent. And, you're going to be okay if you just give your best to your kids.
I have to say, my husband passed away a couple years ago, and I have a 20-year-old and a 24-year-old. And I do say to myself, like, wow, did my husband ever talk to them about XYZ, or things that maybe a mom wouldn't talk, maybe more of a guy thing or more of a dad thing. And I'm honestly kind of like afraid to ask, like, did dad ever talk to you about blah, blah, blah? Because I just think it's kind of uncomfortable with a mom and a son, kind of having that conversation. So when you're saying that it's nice to have another male figure that can, speak to them, or, that you can trust, that really, really does help.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's why it's important to have a community of people, and I attend a church, I go to a small group, and those are people that we depend upon for many things in our life. And so whether that's extended family or people that you've come close to, I think that is really important, that you have a tribe that helps you in this process of parenting and encourages you and supports you when things go sideways, which they inevitably do go sideways. So you're in that phase that I'm in. So I've got young adult children. Did you say it was 2 boys?
2 boys. Yeah.
20
and 24.
Okay. Yeah. And so midlife unfiltered, right? That's kind of where people who are listening are at. They're in what I call quadrant 4 of this stage of development. And that's ages 21 and up. And there's a whole way of dealing with empty nest as parents and a way of managing all that I think is important, that I also try to teach, because there's a lot of attention given to parents with younger kids and, babies or elementary age, even teenagers. But there's not a lot of stuff out there for parents who have adult children and the complexities that go along with that. So I've tried to speak to that some as well.
It's true, because I think we feel like our kids are grown up. Okay, now they're not that they're not part of me anymore, but all right, okay, go do your thing. And that's not, I live with a very unique situation, so I completely understand. I have my younger one is special needs, and my older one is like trying to figure himself out. And without a dad, to him, it's very hard and emotional.
Yeah.
So we don't let go. I don't think you ever let go as a parent, regardless of their age.
That matters.
So that's a great thing to talk about.
That matters more than anything. I absolutely agree. I think what I see with parents of adult children, young adult children in particular, is, well, they think they're out there on their own. And so they kind of feel like their job is done, but there's a lot to do. Your leadership is still there. Your wisdom is still there. It just looks differently. You're not the authority anymore, but you're an influencer, always available to be there for your kids. What I find with people in that stage of life, Donna, is it's one of 2 things, or maybe even both of these things. Number one, they have a really hard time with the decisions their kids are making, and they want to control them and tell them what to do. They don't like how they're raising their kids, or
100%.
Some of their life choices, or who they're dating, that kind of thing. And it's really hard. I've learned to have to do this.
Mhm.
Not easy.
It's not easy at all. That is exactly it. The other thing I've seen happen, and this is a little tragic, is that we form our identity around our kids so much as they're growing up,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I mean,
yes.
it's a part of who we are. It's
Yeah.
ingrained in our DNA. And then they leave the house and you walk by the bedroom. It's empty. The house is quiet. There's an ache that takes place. And many parents can't get past that. In fact, research says it takes about 18 months to 2 years for a parent to feel better about the fact that their child has left the home. And
Right.
for me, in my experience,
Will agree.
that feels about right.
What do you
Yeah,
think
I will agree.
the mom or the dad who feels it the most? Or
Well,
is that not a comparable question?
I work with dads, but my guess would be moms. Yeah. My
Yeah.
guess would be moms. And I think that emotional attachment, and probably even with respect to the kids back to the parents, I think they would feel more emotionally, distant from a mom and want to keep that relationship. But what I've found is I've talked to young adults is they want their parents to still be involved in their life
Yes.
in a huge way. But many parents in this stage, because they've lost a part of their identity, have never found their own purpose after their kids leave the home. And then they do this tragic thing of using their children to meet their own emotional needs. And children are not there to meet your emotional needs, right? That's just a hard truth.
Hard to separate.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to separate. So, we raise our kids their entire life to one day go off and go away from us. But what I found is that many parents are not struggling as much with their kids going away as much as they're having to learn to be independent from their kids, right? The kids are doing okay as far as being independent from the parents, but the parents being independent from the kids are having a hard time. So
Yeah.
there's a tug. I have an ache in my heart at times because I miss my kids. And so I tell parents in that stage that, listen, you have to keep initiating with your kids. They're busy. You remember that time of life. They're busy. They have young children. They don't call as much as you want. They don't, they don't initiate as much as you want. My kids don't do that. I have to be the grown up in this, and I have to keep initiating. I have to keep calling, sending a text, not overwhelming them, trying to find that balance between when I can come and when I can't, and, how to be involved in their life and that kind of thing. So we have to keep going. And then the second thing is really, we've got to find some purpose outside of parenting that's bigger than that. Otherwise, we're just going to dry up and shrivel up and not have anything really to live for. We love our kids. We live for our kids in many ways. Sometimes that's a little unhealthy, but in the end, that distance away from them is really hard to manage. And so we've got to find a purpose outside of them.
I think exactly what you just said should be handed out at the hospital when you have your child.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you still have an identity. And that's what I think 90%
So true.
of the people
It's-
just, and I'm one of them.
I am too.
You kind of forget that, you are a person and you have things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes all by the wayside.
Yeah. In fact, I think the research would bear out that it's not healthy. And you know this to be true. And I'm not saying that this was true about you. It was somewhat true about me. It's not healthy for kids that parents are codependent upon their children, that they make them their entire world, and that all of life centers around them and they're the center of the universe. That can be a little unhealthy for children in their development.
Yeah, for sure.
So I hear, because I still have teenagers at home, but I hear their friends will say, "Oh, my dad is my best friend." And I'm like, okay, I have a problem with, I think it's great that you have a relationship with your parent, but at the same time, for me, I'm like, I feel like you have to structure them, you have to discipline them, but at the same time, you want to have that relationship with them that they can come to you and talk to you. And then I'm like, okay, I will be my child's best friend after I'm done raising them, but I still need to be their parent. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, I had 5 or 6 teenage boys on my house, and I was here. I'm like, "Oh yeah, my dad is my best friend," but then they're like, "My mom is this," and I'm like, "Okay." So, for a dad who obviously wants to be their child's buddy, and where would you tell them to separate that part? Because I think it's great that their parents are their best friends, but at the same time, I feel like they have to, parents have to also play the other role?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really goes to the heart of what I'm trying to say to men. The whole idea of father friend is to find the balance and the tension between authority and affection, between strength and tenderness, between your title as a dad, but then also your love and the trust you're seeking to build with your child, between correcting your kids, which we need to do, but also connecting to them. So that's the paradox there. And that's the tension that we need to manage. And as I told you guys before we started the show, most dads are comfortable doing one and not the other.
Right.
So when you say to me, a child would say, my dad, as a teenager, a child would say, my dad is my best friend. Yes, that's great. But it makes me wonder about, do they respect that father, as a father, not just a friend. And has that dad not just loved his child and been a buddy to that child, but has he led them and influenced them and helped them to be what they need to be? So anyway, that is the balance that dads need to find. And I challenge men to give to their children what the children need, not what they're most comfortable giving.
Is it more of like a reminding, like this, like, don't forget I'm your father, like, because it's such a thin line between
It is
authority and friendship.
Yeah.
Is it more of a reminder to the child, like, I am still your father and I'm still I'm still an authority figure.
Yeah, it is.
It's an effort to communicate something like that.
No, you have to. And it is about communicating it, because your child's mind will drift to one to the other also. And so you do have to have moments where you're like, hey, listen, I'm your father. And there's nothing wrong with reminding your child of your title and even of your authority. We're not talking about authoritarianism. We're talking about proper authority, which every child needs. And then reminding them also sometimes, hey, I deeply care about you. I love you and I want to connect to you. Yes, I'm your father, but I also want to have a relationship with you, that makes us feel like we can stay connected and that you can come to me about anything. So yeah, you have to remind your kids of both.
Yeah. Yeah. Not easy.
So
it's not, it's just not easy.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about there's 7 core competencies a dad need for every child's stage of life. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So let me just quickly go through the plan here, the model.
Okay.
So the developmental stages are 4 developmental stages. I've broken them down by ages 0 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 20, and then 21 and above. So in ages 0 to 6, the primary role the father needs to fulfill is that of leader. He's establishing his leadership of his children, and he's building a foundation in a child's life of who is safe, who can be trusted, who is there that's in charge, because children will want to be in charge, right? They will want to be in control. So I think a father, particularly a strong, loving man, plays a role of establishing leadership in a child's life there. So I've called that's the strong protector stage. That's what the dad needs to be. In ages 7 through 12, the dad transitions to a primary role. Again, it's not the only thing he does, but it's a primary role he needs to fulfill. Based upon research, he becomes a coach. I call him the confidence builder in ages 7 through 12. This is kind of the sweet spot for most dads. In fact, if we had dads on here, most of them would say, man, that 7 to 12 window was so fun, because dads have a lot of influence in that time.
Right.
In the early years, focus of a child tends to be toward mom, but with an engaged father, the research says that focus tends to shift toward the father. And so this is a time where a dad needs to coach his kid so that the child becomes competent in some things. He discovers the gifts of that child. He provides opportunities for them to explore their gifts. He coaches them and trains them so that they develop, by the time they get to their teenage years, they develop 2 things: confidence in who they are. There's a basic sense of confidence in who I am, that I can try things, I can work hard, and I can eventually succeed in some things. And then competence about doing certain things, that they have competence in and skills in some things. And then you move into the teenage years, ages 13 through 20. The role that a dad takes is that of a mentor. Authority has given way now to influence. We don't practice the same kind of authority that we had. We still have authority, but we don't practice it. We still need to be present, but we need to be present in a different way. And so a dad becomes, in my opinion, a mentor. And I call that the steady anchor stage, because teenage years are like a roller coaster. Everything is changed.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of that right now.
Yeah. And, a father, the most important thing a father can do is to remain a calm and consistent presence through the ups and downs of that whole time, seeking to empower that teenager, where the child that once trusted you, now you're starting to trust and empower them and give them freedom with also responsibilities.
Yep.
And they're now owning values for themselves. They're determining, hey, is the way I raised the same thing that I believe in my life? And all those things, everything is becoming their own, and their bodies are changing. They're starting to notice the opposite sex. They're wanting to date. Friends are now more important than parents. The pressures they're facing with social media and comparisons, all these things are happening, and dad needs to be a strong, sturdy presence. I like to say that during the teenage years, the storms rage, right? The waves are being tossed, but anchors don't move just because the waters get rough. And a dad's got to stay calm and stay consistent through that time, get their kids through that change. And then 21 and up is those young adult years. The dad then becomes the friend. That's the role that he plays. Hopefully, if you've laid the foundation throughout all those years, now you get to enjoy the rewards of a whole different kind of relationship, a friendship with your child, where you're an advisor to them, you're a supporter of them. And as we just talked about, we have a whole different kind of relationship. And so that's the whole sequence. And I know it sounds very kind of linear and scientific, but I know, believe me, because I've run that race, I know that there are a lot of ups and downs, a lot of back and forth. It's not quite as methodical as I've laid it out, but at least it gives men an idea of, hey, this is the role I should really fulfill. I'm going to do a lot of things for my child, but it's important that I give my child this role in this stage. I need to be a leader in those early stages, establish that. I need to be a coach to my kids in 7 to 12. I need to be a mentor to them and just walk beside them through this craziness. And then eventually I hope to reap the reward of being a friend.
What a wonderful way to look at it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Have you
I'm in the second to the last stage.
Yeah. You and your husband are in that steady anchor stuff, right?
Yes. So we're smack in the middle of the teen. My youngest two are boys and my oldest two are girls. So I have an 18-year-old and an almost 20-year-old. So basically this fall, they'll both be away in college and then I'll be stuck at home with the boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
The younger one, he's giving me rent for his money.
You know what? Yeah. You know exactly what I'm talking about, boy.
Yeah.
So Nick, outlast them. That's what you have to do.
I do. They do. I always joke that I always say, I'm like, you have dual citizenship. I can send you to go live with grandma in her clay hut in Nigeria. They're like, nope, we're good. I'm like, that's what I thought.
There you go. That's right.
I wouldn't do that, but that's just, I always like to joke. That is my little threat with them. So I have a question for you, because this has happened not with me, but with a very close family friend, where the dad had to pull the dad card, and because his daughter, his stepdaughter, who he's raised for pretty much her whole life, chose to go down the path of drugs and alcohol, and they had to say, we love you, but you can't be here anymore. You can't be in our house. You can't be around us, because, they had to protect the grandbabies. They had to protect the, everybody else. And I remember being on the phone and talking with them about this. And I said, you have to decide, as much as it's painful, I said, I'm like, you're probably going to have to cut ties. And they were like, okay, because she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She was bringing over friends that were also doing the same thing as her. And he took the bull by the horn and just said, no, you're gone. He's
Yeah.
like, if you don't want help and you don't want us to help you and you don't think you're doing anything wrong, there's the door. And he had to do that. And they don't know where she is to this. I refer to her as a niece because I've literally known her entire life.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's yeah. So what would you tell a dad that even a stepdad that sadly has to do that? Because
Yeah.
it's very hard. It wasn't easy for them to do.
No, it's the hardest thing to do. I
Mhm.
think your advice was spot on. How old was this girl?
27. She even
My,
had
yeah,
two kids. She even
yeah,
had two kids who are being raised by their dad. Like he
yeah,
is like everything that you talked about being a single dad and having like they go visit their grandparents. Like, instead of mom having them, they go to grandma and grandpa's house and they go to the auntie's house. So they're very much part of the family. It's just that sadly the kids want nothing to do with her because they know what she's doing. They're just like,
yeah.
no. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Especially at that
Mhm.
age, at some point, you have to protect the remainder of your
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, sadly, I've counseled parents. I've counseled parents who have made the hard decision and done what you just described. But
Yeah.
I've talked to a couple of families who were unwilling to do that, and it only crippled
Mhm.
their kids, and it
Yeah.
only lengthened the time of the challenges and the disruption and the chaos
Yeah.
in the home.
Yeah.
So you have to ultimately, especially a 27-year-old, you have to ultimately
Yeah.
say, listen, you're an adult. You're obviously making adult decisions. You're going to have to live with the adult consequences of those
Yeah.
decisions, and we have to protect everybody else in our home. So yes, you have to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I just remember when they were just crying. They were so heartbroken. But I was like, you have grandbabies who are anywhere between newborn to 17. I was like, do you want them seeing that? I'm like, do you want them? I'm like, you've tried to help her. You have given her options. You were there for her. You stood by her. You loved her. I was like, you still love her, but you now have to do the hardest decision you're going to have to make, and you're going to have to say you can't come back if you're going to be doing this.
Yeah, the
It
irony
was
is
yeah.
is that that's probably what is going to be best for that
Yeah.
daughter. If you've tried everything
Yeah.
else, then the
Yeah, they
very
tried.
best
Yeah.
thing that you can do is to do exactly that. That's going to
Yeah.
hopefully save your daughter, because she's going to
Yeah.
experience the consequences and the misery of her choices. And sometimes people only change. We know this. We
Yeah.
only change when the pain of our decision is worse than the pleasure of our decision, right?
Yeah.
And
No, it's
so
true.
Absolutely.
pain is a great teacher. And unfortunately, there's just some kids, some people, not just kids, that
Mhm.
have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. He
That leads into one of my questions I have
yeah,
for you. So have you ever counseled someone that is in the friend stage, the 21 plus stage, that said, listen, I really messed up. How do I fix this?
yeah, I certainly have. I've talked to dads who feel great regret. And, the thing I tell them is, listen, you can't change the past. Unfortunately, you
yeah.
can't change the past. It's not as important what you didn't do. What's important is what you do from this point on. That's all you
Right.
have control
100%.
of. That's all
Hmm.
you have control of at that point. You
Yeah.
can
That's
only do now, today, what you can do, and you can't go back and change those things. So start where you are and understand what it means to be a father to your child at that age, or a mother to your child at that age. Start there, be the best person you can be. And then after that, you just have to trust the outcomes on their own. You just have to hope and pray that things can be redeemed. I personally believe that God can restore and redeem even lost years.
Right.
Relationships can turn around. There are those kinds of miracles. Yes, there are missed opportunities. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't change it, but it can actually look a lot differently in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Interesting.
I agree with you on that one. My niece, her biological father was in and out of her life. And I remember I was in the house one day and I think she was 2.5, and he had shown up and he said, hey, do you want to come home with me? And she looked at him, and again, she was like 2, and it took everything in me not to laugh. But she said, let me go ask my dad. aka the stepdad who had been her in her life, literally her little 2.5 years. And the look on his face, he was broken. He did not even know how to react. He just was like, you know what? He just like, I forgot I have something to do, because he didn't know how to do it. And he turned around and left. And that's just how he rolled. But now that she's an adult, they have an amazing relationship. And he has apologized to her for not being there, for doing this and doing that. And he even said, and her stepdad's name is Mike, like you. And he's like, that is your dad. He goes, yes, I helped bring you into this world. He said, but he is your dad. And he said, I will not take that away from you. And he said, if you ever get married one day and you want him to walk you down the aisle versus me, he goes, I will not be upset about it. He goes, because I don't deserve that. And she's like, and even though she's forgiven him, they hashed it out. She asked him why. And he just said, because I didn't have a father in my life, so I didn't know how to handle this. I didn't know what to do. And
Wow.
that's what you've been talking about, is he didn't know. And he's admitted his mistakes, and he's an
Yeah.
amazing person.
Yeah.
It's just that at that time, he didn't know what to do. And I think having your 2-year-old tell you that, I think was almost like a wake-up call for him.
Yeah.
But it took him many years to fix that. Many,
Wow.
many years.
Well, that's a man that's healing. And Donna,
Yeah.
going back to your question. Yeah, I think one of the first things you have to do is ask forgiveness for
Yeah.
not being there. And
Yeah.
that it's got to start right there.
Mm-hmm.
I am so sorry. I've come to realize that I have missed opportunities with you. I have blown it as a father, and I am sorry. Will you forgive me? And I want us to do better in the years ahead. That's the thing to do.
What can we do to move forward?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That will be your book
So
number 2.
All right. That sounds good.
The healing.
I always so obviously we were talking earlier about sadly a lot of young men are being raised by their moms, and they don't have dads in their lives. The moms are doing their best, and then a young man becomes a dad. I mean, how would you guide them in a situation where they don't have a father figure? All they had was their mom, which there's nothing wrong with that, and vice versa either way. To sit there and not go, oh, I'm blaming this on because I didn't have a dad. Like, they don't want to take accountability for their actions. So they're going to blame it on not having a father in their life.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is get my book and read it.
Right. Yes.
And then, because I challenge that very thing, but all of us have been handed some form of brokenness, right? We live in a broken world. Even if we had good parents, they're not perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
Right.
Exactly. And I came from a broken alcoholic family. My dad was not physically or, sexually abusive. He was physically abusive to my mom. And I have vivid memories of that. He was just absent more than anything else. Never taught me how to shake a man's hand or change a tire or tie a necktie. He never told me he loved me his entire life. Never could say that. And for many men, Nick, that creates a passion in them to give to their kids something they didn't receive. And in that sense, I wouldn't want to go back and choose that again. But in that sense, that brokenness is a blessing now, because I've come to recognize it, and I've determined in my heart that I was going to give my kids something better than what I received. So if a man can, step up in that way, yes, but it's no excuse. We are still responsible for the lives that God has given us, regardless of what was handed to us. Again, we can't change that, but we have to be responsible now. There's no excuse, just absolutely no excuse for a man saying, well, the reason I'm not, engaged with my kids is that I had a bad father.
Yeah.
That's just irresponsible. And it's not owning, the precious gifts that God has given to you.
Yeah,
so
it's just a crutch, really.
It is. And I think if you have a guy like that, you just have to speak that kind of truth to him, because he's misguided. Everyone has issues. Everybody has problems. Everybody has struggles. And every one of us have been handed down something that was not perfect. And we have to deal with what we've been given.
I think that was with my dad. I'll tell you a little bit of story about him. He lived with his parents were married, and then his dad went away to jail for a DUI. And then he was raised by another man for several years, but he got married, had 2 kids, my dad did, and he was involved in their life, I want to say, for probably the first 6 years. And then they got divorced, and then he wasn't involved in their life. He just, I never really, I tried to ask him why, and he always had like some excuse. But then when he met my mom, and obviously he had us, I feel like he was wanting to make up for the absence for what he did to them. So he always made sure we had everything we wanted, and he loved us and he was there for us because he wasn't there for my older 2 siblings. And yes, they had an amazing stepdad who is their dad who raised them. But, I always was like, were you this way toward us because of your regrets of not being there for them? I never got the answer out of him. He's no
Mm.
longer living anymore. But I sometimes feel that's what he did because even though he didn't really have an excuse, because he said he had a dad, and then he acknowledges his stepdad as his father. He's like, he was an amazing person, loved him, he was a great dad, blah, blah, blah. But then something happened, and but I feel like he just was making it up for the absence of not being involved in their life.
Yeah, I think that's what men should do, and women should do too. I mean, whatever, again, they've come from, they turn that around, and it does create for those who are self-aware, who have come to grips with, what has been handed down to them. Many of us, probably all 3 of us, have said, no, I didn't have a perfect parent, but I'm going to give my kids my very best and give them something different. And so in that way, you can redeem a lot. And that brokenness can be something that can be turned into something that is really redeemed for good.
Yeah. And he was very, very hands-on. Even after I got married, he was call every day and talk to my kids, before he passed away.
Right.
And, he lived in Washington. I lived obviously on the East Coast. So, but it was, he definitely was making up for that and just wanted to be very much involved as he could. And it broke my heart that he wasn't there for my older 2 siblings. But they're good. They turned out to be amazing kids, amazing adults. Yeah. So, wow. Well, thank you so much. This was, I could go on forever.
This.
I think we could talk for another hour or so, couldn't we?
We probably could.
There's a lot there.
Yes.
There's a lot to unpack.
Especially on teenage boys. Mine's giving me a run for his money, but that's okay.
Yeah, I understand.
I love him.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed being with you. If I could, I just would like to mention, please go and pre-order my book. It's called Father Friend, and the best place to get it is on barnesandnoble.com. And they can pre-order it, and it'll arrive on their doorstep on January 26th. That's the publication date. And if there are dads out there or moms who want some resources, they can go to my website. It's Father Friend.
Perfect. And I will link all of that below on all of our, when we post it on our Spotify, our YouTube and everything. I will link everything below.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. We truly appreciated you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.